The battle over voting rights is boiling over. Republicans in Georgia, Texas, Arizona, and Florida have passed or are considering new, tougher voting laws, and hundreds of new restrictions have been proposed nationwide. But Georgia's new voting law has faced a backlash. Atlanta-based companies, including Coca-Cola and Delta, criticized the law, and Major League Baseball moved its All-Star game out of Georgia. Senator Mitch McConnell lashed out at some of these corporate leaders.
I think this is quite stupid to jump in the middle of a highly controversial issue.
While the House passed a bill expanding voter access in March, it faces stiff opposition in the Senate. Meanwhile, a new tape has surfaced shedding light on dark money. More on this later. But first, we begin with the battle over voting rights. And joining us tonight are three top Washington reporters: Errin Haines, editor-at-large for the 19th, Eamon Javers, senior Washington correspondent for CNBC, and Jane Mayer, chief Washington correspondent for The New Yorker. Errin, I'm going to start with you. You're a Georgia native. You've covered the battle over voting rights extensively. Is this what we're seeing now, these new voter laws that are being passed or proposed by Republicans in so many state legislatures, is this just a response to the 2020 election, or is there something more going on?
Well, good evening, Amy. Good to be with you and good to see you in the chair. Listen, as somebody who is from Georgia and who has long covered the Georgia legislature, I can tell you that Georgia was certainly telling the big lie before it was the big lie. Some 15 years ago, when I was covering the legislature down in Georgia, they were pioneering voter ID laws that were mimicked by several other states after Georgia was successful in passing those. And they were arguing then that it was about, ballot integrity and really, the threat of voter fraud that has yet to be proven, including in this last election, which was declared by our own government as the most secure in U.S. history. And so this has long been a solution in search of a problem, and really has come to define the issue of election integrity has come to define what we know as 21st century voter suppression and intimidation. Georgia is again in 2020 leading the way, kind of bolstered by obviously the big lie perpetuated by former President Trump and espoused now by other Republicans. But it is certainly not new, and it is certainly something that I think we are continuing to see now that Georgia has passed its law in states from Texas to Arizona and beyond, 43 states across the country attempting to pass similar laws.
Right. Well, when you hear the pushback from Republicans, including the governor of Georgia, is, you know what, look, it's easier to vote in Georgia than New York. We have better absentee vote and early vote laws, more access to voters through those laws than some of these blue states.
Well, I think what that goes to show is that, this is not just about states that maybe had a history of discrimination. That history that was they attempted to address with Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which was dismantled in 2013 Shelby versus decision. You're seeing voter suppression efforts happening in states outside of the South, in states that were not necessarily taking these kinds of tactics during Jim Crow. And so it's not that voter suppression is not on the march just in Georgia or just in Pennsylvania, where I now live, which also attempted voter ID and has attempted to curtail voting. But you have other states outside of that part of the country that have also moved to curb voting rights.
Eamon, I want to move to you and the corporate response to this. I mean, we've been seeing now for some time that corporations or their corporate leaders getting engaged on social issues. But what has also been fascinating is watching the pushback from many Republicans who criticize what the corporations are saying. So what's going on here?
I mean, it's fascinating. We just haven't seen companies get this involved in politics and sort of American society like we've seen in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter protests and now in 2021 with this voting issue. And you get the sense that what companies here are doing, look, companies are not ideological. Companies care about making money, and that's just about it, right? So they look at the demographics of the Trump coalition and they say that's a coalition that is older, whiter and more rural than the rest of the country that we want to serve. And in a polarized nation, if we have to make a choice of which demographic to stand with, we're going to go for a younger and more diverse demographic, because that's the future of our business in terms of customers, also the future of the business in terms of the employee base. So a lot of these companies are coming down hard against this voting measure in Georgia because they want to signal demographically to their future employees and their future customers of where they are, and they think that's where the country is going. This is all about making money, though. Remember, these companies have not become liberal, and you can see that just in the opposition we saw just this week from a lot of companies to Joe Biden's tax plan, right? They're saying, wait a second, we don't want to pay for this infrastructure. We want you to spend money, but let's not put the bill solely on American corporations.
Right. I mean, that's really interesting, too, the point you make about employees, because the sense that I get as well is this pressure on the corporations isn't just coming from the outside. Republicans say, let's activists pressuring them, but they're hearing a lot from their own employees, including many who moved to these once red states from blue areas.
Yeah, and we saw this in Silicon Valley a couple of years ago, and we're really seeing it now throughout the rest of the economy. Companies like Delta, Coca-Cola, Major League Baseball, all looking at their employees and saying, we need to attract those younger hires. How are we going to do that? We need to be seen by that group as on the right side of history, ultimately. And again, you know, a generation ago, companies might have said, we're just not going to take stands on big social issues because, you know, it's divisive and it's a 50-50 country and we don't want to lose half of our customer base. Now, with things so intensely polarized, I think companies are looking at that and saying, if we're going to have to take a stand, and we might as well take a stand that puts us on the side of the future. And that's why you're seeing companies do this. But again, it's a business decision. They want to make money. This is not really about the values at stake here. This is about positioning themselves as a business for the future.
Jane, I want to talk to you about that, it seems this new sort of rift here, or maybe it's an old rift that's getting brought up with the voting rights legislation between the business community and Republicans. You had Mitch McConnell earlier this week saying, my warning to corporate America, stay out of politics. Now, he walked that back a couple of days later, but other Republicans, including the governor of Georgia, say, you know, we got to fight against this so-called woke corporate culture. They take this sort of as a badge of honor to see corporations coming out against legislation that they're promoting. So you have covered this nexus between politics and money for a long time now. Is business breaking up with the Republicans?
Well, you began to see a little bit of a break really towards right after the election, and you could see, and after January 6th, remember, right. And the riot on the Hill, you could see that there were some corporate leaders who were saying they were no longer going to give to any members of Congress who didn't certify Biden's election, who were challenging that certification. So you began to see it there. I mean, basically, I think anybody who's followed politics for a while, and particularly followed Mitch McConnell, the minority leader of the Senate, you can't help but be struck by the irony of this. It's pretty thick in that there is pretty much nobody who's done more to cement the role and the power of corporate America in American politics than Mitch McConnell. And he's made his reputation saying that it's a principle with him that corporations have the right to speak. And that they have First Amendment rights. But it turns out, it seems that what he's really saying is their wallets have the right to speak, so long as they're giving donations, particularly to the Republican Party. But he really does not want to hear from specifically the chief executives if they're going to stand up and complain about Republican policies. There's been a kind of a tacit agreement between corporate America and the Republican Party, and in which the Republican Party delivered tax cuts and deregulation, and corporate America delivered campaign donations. And that is obviously under a lot of strain right now.